Carlos with ESPN Los Angeles on the road to recovery, presented by Hoag Orthopedic Institute. Always happy to be joined by Dr. Alan Beyer. Dr. Beyer, we got some urgent news coming from the Rams. Injury to their star wide receiver, Puka Nacua. He's been withstanding a lot of hard hits this season. He's also been one of the NFL's top wide receivers in offensive weapons overall. I mean, arguably, he is an offensive player of the year so far through week 6, but he dealt with an injury last week against the Ravens early in the game, and it is an ankle injury. So, Doc, what do you see with Puka Nacua's injury at that moment?
Well, as usual with injuries like this, you're not getting a ton of information from the coaching staff or the training staff. I think all we've heard so far is it's not a long-term injury, which implies to me that it's not a high ankle sprain. It's a, for want of a better term, run-of-the-mill ankle sprain, which is confined to the lower ligaments around the ankle. As we've said many times before, these can be anywhere from grade 1 to grade 3. Grade 3 being a complete rupture. Clearly, it's not that. So it's a mild sprain of a few fibers, a moderate sprain where maybe half of the ligament is damaged. But the beauty is, we've come a long way in treating these sprains. He can be braced, he can be taped. A lot of things can be done to get him back out on the playing field sooner, depending on how he responds to his initial acute therapy and the swelling and his discomfort. Now, obviously, in a position such as his, there's a lot of twisting coming down on, from jumping to catch a ball, coming down on a slightly twisted ankle and re-injuring it. So you want to be sure that he's at least back to 90% or more of his pre-injury state. They got a tough game this week on a long road trip against the Jaguars in London. It's a long plane flight. Um, Injured body parts, everybody knows. Every weekend warrior knows this. If you have an injury and you're on an airplane, which is only pressurized to about 7 or 8 thousand feet of altitude, you're flying at 35,000 feet of altitude, it tends to make any part of your body that's inflamed or hurt swell somewhat more. Is he going to experience that on a 12-hour flight to and from London from Los Angeles? So if he's not close to being ready to play in this game, if I were the medical staff of the Rams and the coaching staff of the Rams, and I felt there was a doubt that he was going to be ready for Sunday in London, I would probably keep him home and let him keep getting his optimal physical therapy at home, and he'll be more than ready for the week after that.
Dr. Beyer, I'm glad that you mentioned that long flight. They actually decided to stay in Baltimore in order to prepare for their flight against the Jaguars in London, the last international game, at least in London for the Rams for the NFL. Um, Give us some insight, Doc. If you're on that plane and Puka Nacua is getting that treatment, what things should we expect to see him get worked on his ankle?
Well, they'll obviously work with doing some compression therapy on the plane to keep the swelling down. We have devices that can be put on the ankle and intermittently squeeze it. The other thing that I didn't mention, which bears mentioning, is that any injured lower extremity is a bit more at risk of developing blood clots when you're in the air in an unpressurized or a lowly pressurized cabin, which is why I'll tell any patient that's had any kind of injury or surgery to the lower extremity, don't just sit on your behind for the whole, well, from Baltimore, only probably about a 7 hour flight. Um, but get up, walk around, do your ankle pumps, do all that stuff while you're on the flight. Obviously, the training staff will be tending to him during the flight, should he go, with some intermittent compression therapy, maybe even some stimulation, electrical stimulation. All these kinds of things can be delivered on an airplane. They don't need to be done, at sea level. But it all depends on how he's coming along. If they think he's ready to play, then you take the chance and you treat him while you're flying there and when you get there and go for it. Again, the only indication we have so far, it's only Tuesday, is that it's not a long-term problem. What does that mean in coach speak? That can mean anything from day to day to he's out for 3 to 4 weeks.
And that especially coming from Sean McVay, who is a very positive and optimistic coach who speaks a lot of coach speak and is hard to decode at times. So we'll see what the true deciding factor is, not until Sunday. But I want to go back to what you mentioned before, Doc. Is that why pregnant women are asked to wear compression socks on flights?
Well, again, pregnant women, because of the fact that there's pelvic congestion because of everything that's going on down there, when they're on a long flight, they're compressing those veins in the lower extremities. So their venous return from their lower extremities is suboptimal, which is why they're likewise instructed to wear compressive hose during a long flight and do their ankle pumps and walk up and down the aisle some and not just sit in that one position and allow the blood to just congest in your lower extremities.
Thanks, Doc, for that insight. But I think a lot of fantasy football owners and Rams fans would love to see Puka Nacua on the field against the Jaguars early on Sunday in London, but not at the risk of maybe some longer term hurt for his ankle. We'll see what happens, Doc. But thanks again for sharing your insight and your information on the road to recovery presented by the Hoag Orthopedic Institute. Doc, what's going on this week at Doc in the Dugout?
Doctor in the Dugout's pretty excited this week. We've got a special guest, Todd Marinovich, former USC star quarterback. Got plenty of stuff to talk about with Todd Marinovich and what's going on with USC now, what he's doing now with his life. He's been out of the limelight for a while. I'd love to see how Todd's turned it around and gotten himself back on level ground. So tune in and we'll get some insight from Todd Marinovich, one of the great college quarterbacks.
Great timing, especially coming off the Michigan win and into a matchup against Notre Dame.
That's going to be a tough one.